And good afternoon. I'm Jack Fink, political reporter here at CBS 11 in Dallas-Fort Worth. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. The 2018 midterm elections are heating up in Texas. And today we are all excited because we're releasing the results of our new CBS 11 Dixie Strategies Texas poll. And here to talk about the results, the managing partner of Dixie Strategies, Brian Graham. We also have next to him Deborah Peoples, the Democrat Party chair in Tarrant County, and Karen Watson, Dallas County's GOP vice chair. We also want to hear from you on Facebook, so let us know what you think. If you have any questions, Aparna Zalani is helping me out, as always, with your questions and your comments and your thoughts. Don't be shy, but please be polite. So let's get right to the first result, shall we? The U.S. Senate race. Everybody is talking about this race, not only here in Texas, but it's also gotten some nationwide exposure. So let's go take a look first at the numbers. So in our poll, very tight race. Ted Cruz, 46%. Beto O'Rourke, 42%. Undecided, 11%. Brian, what do you make of this race? Is this too close to call for Cruz?
Well, I think Cruz is up here, obviously, in the poll, but it is too close for Cruz. Cruz should be further ahead in a state like Texas.
And so what do you make, why is this happening?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers, Ted Cruz, as we have seen in the past, has had some likability issues. Beto O'Rourke is a pretty likable guy. Although a lot of the state might not know exactly where he stands. So Ted Cruz has got some defining to do of his opposition.
All right, Deborah, what do you make of this?
I think we have a great candidate, and I think Beto O'Rourke had an amazing 254 county strategy that he's made it to all 254 counties in Texas. Ted Cruz has not. Once people get to know him, they do like him, and Cruz does have a likability issue, and so O'Rourke doesn't have to win those 254 counties. He has to take votes from Ted Cruz, and that's where Cruz is in the fight of his life. He's got to hold on to some of these votes.
Karen.
I like Ted Cruz, so he doesn't have a likability issue with everybody, not just me. I'm not the only person. Cruz has been a great senator. He will continue to be one. He's going to win this race. He has a fight. All of our candidates have a fight, but we're up for the fight.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that Ted Cruz has a fight?
Yeah.
I think the Democrats and the left know that if they can get Texas, that's a big... it's a big gift for them, and Texas is considered a deep red state. So if they can overturn a strong senator in the state, that is a plus for them. Just like, we have strong fights all over. You have in California, Newsom has a fight for a Republican that's running against him. So all over the country, we have these battles, but Ted Cruz is a good campaigner. He's got strong roots, and he's likable. I like him a lot, and he will win this race.
Let's go to the next slide, because we also asked independents what they thought of each of the candidates as regards to who they're going to vote for. And this is a very tight race. This is even tighter. This is a 2-point race among independents. Brian, 40 for Ted Cruz, 38 for O'Rourke, 20% undecided. Is that a big problem for the fact that there's 20% undecided? Do those automatically go against the incumbent or not?
Well, independent voters are always what we talk about when we do polls and we talk in American politics about who people are after. It's turnout, and it's also independent voters is who you're trying to convince. It looks like Ted Cruz has some work to do with independent voters. There's a lot of undecideds there, and he's going to have to define his opponent. Now, the advantage here is that Ted Cruz is widely known. His disadvantage is also that he's widely known. Beto O'Rourke has an advantage in that he's not widely known, and so his negatives are not out there yet. Texas is a conservative state. Once Ted Cruz starts to spend a lot of money defining Beto O'Rourke, I think that his numbers will probably go down.
And you think Cruz's lead will widen? Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, it should. I mean, if you're in a conservative area, conservative state, Texas is arguably a conservative state, and if you are going to define your opposition as being liberal, which I assume is what he's going to do, spending money doing that can only hurt Beto O'Rourke and help Ted Cruz. So whereas some may say that Ted Cruz might not be all that likable, where Beto is likable, Ted Cruz can certainly make it where Beto is not nearly as likable.
And see, Jack, I was going to say, but Cruz has already started trying to throw the mud, and it's not sticking. So he's got to find an issue and quickly, or it's not going to work. I mean, the whole thing about the arrest when he was in the rock band, all those things, they turned on him, and so it's not working. And I think the undecideds are going to break for O'Rourke.
Karen.
That's not going to happen. I mean, it's, you know, it's unicorn land for Democrats in Texas. Texas is conservative. People are going to go to the polls. I know you do. I know.
Even happy
I know. And I keep on talking to liberals. And I'm like, where is this people land that you guys are talking about, where everything is free and everything works? And I would love to visit People Land, but it doesn't exist. People in Texas,
I'm a people's. It does.
Okay, I know. But I'm a Texan. And in Texas, we like small government. We like less taxation. We like a border. We like law and order. Ted Cruz will win. Ted Cruz just needs to, keep on campaigning, and we're behind him.
Let's check in on Facebook about this.
So a lot of people commenting. There are Beto supporters and Cruz supporters. Mm-hmm. So we have Hayden Sparks here. She says Beto is going to win, is going to do well. Ted Cruz is going to win. That's her comment. And then Diane Vetter says, funny, I think most who vote for Beto will vote Democratic, straight Democratic. Greg Abbott is in bad shape as well. Derami Mitchell says Ted's excellent adventure. Brenda says Ted Cruz, no Beto. So we have a lot of people chiming in about which candidate they support.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. And I think it was Brenda or Diane who mentioned Governor Abbott. So let's go to our poll results on Governor Abbott. This is for overall statewide here in Texas. And as you see, Governor Abbott has a huge lead over Democrat Lupe Valdez. This is a 19-point lead that the governor has, 53 to 34%, 12% undecided. Brian, thoughts on this?
Well, clearly Governor Abbott is extraordinarily popular. His numbers are enviable. I would wish that each and every one of my clients had numbers that look like Greg Abbott's numbers. But this is pretty consistent with the polls that we have done over time. We've been polling together for 2 years now.
Right.
And as we have looked at these numbers, we've always polled and looked at Greg Abbott, and he's always been popular. And that seems to be holding true in this election. He's widely known. He has a lot of money. He's well-liked. He doesn't seem to be an individual who makes gaffes or mistakes very often. And so, I don't see his numbers falling much. Lupe is just not well known statewide. And even in an area where she is well known, Abbott does well.
Right, because there was part of our poll that showed even here in the DFW area, Abbott had a big lead over
Correct.
Lupe Valdez.
Correct, he does.
So what does that say? I mean, does she have any chance at all of winning?
Well, you can never say never in politics because 2 months is a political eternity. However, it does not look likely that Lupe Valdez is going to beat Governor Greg Abbott. He has consistently been popular, and for that to change just all of a sudden in 2 months, it's just not likely. And it's, particularly when you look at the money advantage, Greg Abbott has far more money than Lupe Valdez, who his campaign is running on fumes.
Deborah.
Okay. And so I would agree, Lupe has an uphill battle in this, but I'm also with you when you never say never. And so what we've been dealing with in Texas is this consistent universe of voters. And so she's got to get outside of that universe and bring more people to the polls in a midterm election. So she's got to fight, and I agree she's not well known, so she's got work to do, but I'm the eternal optimist. You never say never, and I think we're looking for a big turnout of a non-traditional voters who usually don't vote in midterm elections. And that could be the difference.
Karen.
I love Greg Abbott. He's a great governor. He's well loved in this state.
Why do you think he's so popular?
Oh, because he's so amazing. He's got the record. Oh, you know it is. That's why you're here. You're in this state because it's an amazing state.
No, I'm
and
in
part of the
this state
reason
'cause my parents moved here, and I've been
But if
fighting
this
for
state was a
social
horrible
justice.
state, then you would, like many in California, you get a U-Haul and move. There are people who are coming to this state because of the policies of
Karen,
the state.
that's so terrible.
That is,
You're like, if you don't
No.
like it, get out?
No,
my
I
thing
didn't
is,
say
if
that.
You don't
That is,
like it,
I did not
change it.
say that. That is a
Okay.
non sequitur statement to what I said. What I said is that the numbers prove that people are coming to Texas. The numbers prove that jobs are coming to
And they're
Texas.
Democrats.
And you may hate Greg Abbott, and many people who live in People Land do. But people who live in Texas love the fact that our economy is strong, that regulation is low, and that's why we're growing. There are a lot of people who are coming
And
here.
we're growing with jobs that don't pay a lot. So that's going, I think the demographics are changing. And you may love Greg Abbott. I don't. And there are many other people that don't too.
53%. That's, I remember Deion Sanders
Well,
when he was
that's
playing for the Cowboys. He said,
of
just
people
look at
who
the
vote.
scoreboard.
Okay, but
just look at the scoreboard.
So let's take a look at independents, because that's overall, but just when we focus on those who don't have a party affiliation, Governor Abbott has a very wide lead. I mean, we're talking 30 points here, 53 to 23, 21% undecided. Why do you think there are so many people who are undecided at this point?
Well, I think that when you look at people who are in political parties, they tend to vote more for those political parties. Folks that have no political party tend to be a little more open, and those are the swing voters. That's why people focus on them so very much. And so I think when you look at this poll, you see that that is true, and they are still open. They're still undecided on who they're going to vote for. And perhaps it's because they don't know enough about Lupe Valdez and Governor Abbott to make a decision on which candidate they're going to end up voting for.
So as far as the number of independents in Texas, Deborah mentioned before, and we really don't know what.
Yes.
We have a lot of people who've moved to Texas, that we know. We know that they've moved from California. We know that they've moved from the Northeast, from the Midwest. But we really don't know because you don't have to register to a party here in Texas. So it's how they vote in a primary, I guess, is our most educated guess. Is that fair?
Correct.
Yes.
But also when you look at these numbers, you have to consider that Governor Abbott is going to really turn it on and spend a pile of money, and Lupe is going to be sitting there unable to defend herself, unable to educate people on who she is, because she has no money. So this race might get even uglier for Lupe.
So would you anticipate his lead, his 19-point lead, widening?
It could widen. I mean, when you consider if she doesn't have the resources and she spends no money, and Abbott does, not only could his lead widen, but he could help other Republicans down the ballot by turning out Republicans.
And it could, but look at that undecided. From a sitting governor who is wildly popular, as Karen says, and you still have that many undecided. And I mean, in the race with he and Wendy Davis, he spent a ton of money. People should know him, and for you to have 21% undecided, to me, is hopeful.
Well,
You mean
we're-
Governor Davis?
Okay.
Wait a minute, she didn't win that race.
No, I just said he spent a ton of money
Well,
to
he
get
won that race, and everyone knew.
But he spent a ton of money, and you're still looking at a 21% undecided when he should have had all of that media coverage
pretty
and
significant.
favorability.
Well, I will tell you,
Okay.
this is what I would tell you if you were my client.
Okay.
I would look at these numbers, and I would say, wow, you'd have to get all of them. You'd have to get 100% of the undecideds,
I don't
which
disagree.
isn't
And you
going
would
to
still
happen.
lose.
Well, I don't
And,
disagree, but I just think from a sitting governor that you both are ganging up on me to say it's so wildly popular.
No, I'm not
for him
saying
to
that. I'm
have
just saying people
21%
land, people have different
undecided
ideas.
in a state where he's the incumbent is interesting.
I'm just basing it on
Okay.
the numbers.
Okay.
And the numbers, don't lie. And so you can look at the numbers and the approval
But
and those who
there have
don't
been
approve.
some
and
great
favorable
numbers
ratings.
that we've had some upset races with lately. So I don't, I respect pollsters, but I don't think the polls always tell the true story.
Well, we're going to take a deeper dive into the Senate race and into the governor's race. But first, I want to put up what our basic poll was so that everybody gets a chance to see it. And Brian, if you can, walk us through our poll, because this was done last week, right after Labor Day, And so walk us through the numbers there.
So you have 519 likely voters. You have 225 Republicans, 125.
Actually, we had 195. That should be a 195
Yeah.
Democrats.
Yep.
Yep.
225 Republicans, 195 Democrats, and 99 others.
Right. And
So that breaks down into what usually turns out in the elections here in Texas.
And so let's talk about likely voters, because a lot of the times we see polls and they are registered voters.
Right.
What is the difference between registered voters and likely voters? And in your opinion, why is likely voters a more accurate poll?
Well, a registered voter is just that, a person who's registered to vote. A likely voter is a person who has shown that they vote in the past during midterm elections. And so that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who are likely to vote in a midterm election.
And as far, you mentioned midterm election, because midterms, this is actually going to be, I mean, for so many reasons, a very interesting year. But typically, the midterm is bad for the party that's in power, right? But at the same time, non-presidential years, at least recently, have been better for Republicans. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And that is true historically, because the turnout is lower. Republicans tend to turn out in better numbers than Democrats do, percentage-wise, proportionally. And so Republicans, in most all elections, do turn out proportionally better. That gap widens when you get to midterm elections because the turnout is even lower. And so that's why Republicans tend to be winning a lot of these state-level races around the country.
And just one more thing, and then we're going to take a deeper dive and check back in with Facebook. The fact that we had 225 Republicans, 195 Democrats, and 99 other independents, non-party affiliated. This was a representation of how Texas is as a state.
Correct.
Right? And that's why the numbers are that way.
Correct. Well, it's not only just how, you can't base a poll based upon registration numbers. You have to base it upon who shows up in midterm elections. That's what the numbers are based on.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm in total agreement with Brian on this, on likely voters. And that's with, historically, if we go with likely voters, we lose. Democrats have got to get out and reach outside of that likely voters and get other people that are registered people to the polls. There are enough Democratic voters that are registered that if we can get them to the polls, we win.
How big of a battle has that been for you this year?
Oh, I think voter enthusiasm is up. So it is a battle. Don't get me wrong. It is a battle, but I think it's easier than it's been in years past because people have, our sitting president has been a lightning rod. And so we've been doing a lot of block walking to people who historically have not voted. And we don't even talk the state race. They talk national politics and they're going to go vote.
Karen, what about for the Republican Party in Dallas County? How much of a challenge has it been? Are people energized, or because Senator Cruz has made this part of his campaign, and we'll get to that shortly, where he's urging people not to sit at home. And I'm wondering how big of a challenge is that for you?
We are going to make sure that we get people to the polls. Get out the vote effort is important for all elections. And we're going to make sure that we turn out Republicans and conservatives to the polls. That is a push that we're going to do. Not only is Texas a red state, but Dallas is going to be a red county. So.
All right, let's check back in with Aparna and what people are saying on Facebook, because a lot of the times everybody has a debate while we're debating. So thank you. So what are people saying?
So I have Louis Duran. He says, keep Texas red, vote Ted. Lois Smith says, Beto is a welcome breath of truth. Then we have Hayden Sparks, which, by the way, Hayden is a male, he. Initially, in the first conversation we had, I think I called him a she.
Oh,
so he was
okay.
not happy about
Sorry,
that.
Hayden. No offense.
So he says, I'm not a woman, I'm a male. So anyway, Hayden says Texas has not elected a Democrat statewide since 1994. Belinda Reyna says money should not be the outcome of an election. Then we have Hayden Sparks again. He has good comments, you know. I don't see Sheriff Valdez campaigning. I have seen her maybe 1 or 2 times. Did she drop out of the race?
No, she's still running.
And then, you know, then there are a lot of people going back and forth, just debating about their candidate. And
all right, well, we got some good comments. So Louis, Lois, Mr. Hayden, and Melinda, thank you so much for your comments. Let's take a deeper dive into the Senate race with Senator Cruz against Congressman O'Rourke, the Democrat from El Paso. And this I thought was interesting because this is the undecided by party. So this is the U.S. Senate race, and 11% of Republicans are undecided, 8% Democrats. And what really struck me was the Republican number. Why are 11% Republicans undecided about Ted Cruz?
Well, I think that shows you where there might be a little bit of an enthusiasm gap for Ted Cruz within the Republican Party. That would be my explanation for that. I think that he certainly has excited the Democrats, even if they don't really know Beto O'Rourke. They're definitely going to vote for him. They just know Ted Cruz, and they know they're not voting for him. In the Republican Party, Ted's got to make sure that he secures his base. Governor Abbott and President Trump can certainly help him do that. At the end of the day, I think they will end up falling in line for Ted Cruz. And certainly if Ted Cruz starts to define Beto as being far more liberal than the mainstream in Texas, I think that will also help.
So you think these are latecomers to the party, so to speak? You think they'll be there? Or, I mean, are there cases, I've heard of this, but I haven't seen any, where you have, you know, yards in Dallas that have a Beto sign, but then they also have another Republican sign. I mean, is there any scenario, we were talking about straight ticket votes before, and this is the last main election in Texas that you can do that. So my question is there any scenario, do you think, and I'll have everybody chime in on this, is there any scenario in which Beto O'Rourke could win U.S. Senate and then the rest of the Republicans win statewide? Is that possible? I mean, I know it's possible, but is it realistic?
It is not realistic. It is not realistic. It's just not. There are some Republicans who are still a little chafed over the 2016 campaign when Cruz competed against Donald Trump, and so there are people who are very endeared to Donald Trump and felt that was a slap in the face.
This is during the convention when he was booed, when he didn't endorse then candidate Trump or the nominee.
Yes, but those parties have come together, and Donald Trump will be down in Texas campaigning for Cruz. So it is only, you know, more and more pluses for Ted Cruz.
Brian and then Deborah.
Okay.
I will say that it's certainly possible that Beto could win. You can never say things are impossible in politics, especially with 2 months left. Now, if this poll were a lot closer, I'd be a little bit more worried about Ted Cruz because it's you know, if this was a week out, that would be a little troublesome. But it's not. You have 2 months left. Beto, of course, has a lot of campaigning to do. He could change these numbers. Ted Cruz could certainly change these numbers. I think that Ted Cruz absolutely has to define his opponent, though. I've mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. He has to define his opponent. It has become, by looking at these numbers, it appears that a lot of Texans do not really fully realize who Beto O'Rourke is or where he stands. And so if he were to define him in such a way as to being, you know, where he's a liberal candidate, I think that's going to hurt Beto.
Define. In other words,
define.
Define. In
Okay,
other words, you're talking about he's got to run a whole bunch of negative ads.
He's got to run negative ads.
Right.
He should run some negative ads against Beto and hit him pretty hard with TV ads and radio and direct mail pieces, and that would be define. By define him, I mean
go after
hit him. Yes.
Here's my question.
So Beto is going to win, and let me tell you why. Ted Cruz, and as much as you may love him, people don't respect him. You talk about being a Texan. Here's a man who let somebody talk about his daddy, his wife. I mean, I'm a Texan, and we say, don't come for my family. And here's a man that people don't respect. So Beto is going to win. Do I think that he could win and then Republicans could win further down the ballot? Unfortunately, that could happen, but I think Beto is going to win. And Ted Cruz can throw everything he wants at him, the kitchen sink. I'm going to ask you all to come back with me after the election so we could celebrate Beto's win.
Well, let me ask you this. What if let's take that, okay, and say, let's go out a little bit more. What would have to happen for Beto to win? Obviously, you'd have a huge you'd have a huge swell of Democrats coming to the polls. You would have a whole bunch of independents that have to then come out and vote for O'Rourke. And then you would also have to have some Republicans, right? Because there's just not enough of everybody else. Isn't that right?
You have to tamp down Republican enthusiasm. And so you'd have to have fewer Republicans that went to the polls. And I think that could happen. And the other thing, I want President Trump to come to Texas. I just think that helps us, and it helps independents and Democrats to stay fired up. So bring it on. Come on to Texas.
Well, we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to show, because Brian was talking about ads. And this is a brand new ad that I'm going to show an ad from both Senator Cruz and then Congressman O'Rourke. First, Senator Cruz, this is an ad that was just started playing today in smaller Texas markets. So we're talking about East Texas. Let's take a listen.
Refusing to stand for the national anthem is disrespectful.
No, I don't think it's disrespectful. And I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee.
Texan Tim Lee stepped on a landmine in Vietnam.
I gave 2 legs to this country. I'm not able to stand, but I sure expect you to stand for me when that national anthem is being played.
In November, where will you stand?
I'm Ted Cruz, and I approve this message.
Does Beto O'Rourke think refusing to stand for the national anthem is disrespectful?
Okay, so we got the idea. He is going after Congressman O'Rourke for his position, a video that went viral, defending the NFL players who took a knee during the national anthem. And so do you think that's effective in, you said, defining O'Rourke?
I think it's effective in certain markets in the state. And I think we talked about that he was running this ad mainly in East Texas.
Small markets.
And so, and in smaller markets, in more rural areas. And I think that, yes, that would be an effective ad for rural areas. How far it'll move the needle, I'm not sure. But certainly Beto's negatives need to go up, and this could help contribute to that.
Deborah.
And see, I think that's why he's running it in smaller markets, because he thinks it could potentially help. But I think one of the things with Beto O'Rourke's 254 county strategy, when people get to know Beto O'Rourke, they like what they hear. And so I think the fact that Beto's already been there helps him.
And Karen.
Well, I think that, 254 counties in this great state of Texas, but I mean, there is Loving County and it has less than 20 people. So it's just knowing what this state is all about. I mean, I'm a native Texan, and I think those values that he talks about are important to Texas, that you stand when the national anthem. So that's a big split across the country, but
then
I
you
think
wear the national anthem, the flag on your butt as a bikini, and you think that's okay?
I think, again, that's a non sequitur, and that's such a Democrat strategy to not stay on topic, but to pivot to something else.
That's the truth. Let's talk about why he chose to kneel. He's protesting
again, another non
police
sequitur.
brutality in this country.
Again, another
and that's for me, to try to take what is happening in this country around police brutality and make it an issue to divide people and be so divisive is totally un-American, and I think that's why people are going to see through that.
And then I would love to,
but you have to look at the bigger issue.
I would love to have a conversation with her about that.
Karen, you can't sit there and say,
and I'm willing to have a conversation about multiple issues.
But what I wanted, you have to talk about,
and I'm willing to have, but I know there's,
if you're going to talk about the ad.
We're time blocked.
Well,
I'm
willing to do that.
Let me just have Karen finish her thought on the ad, and then I want to
going back to what we were saying.
Finish
I
the
think
thought.
that that is going to be an effective ad in those markets where he's putting them in.
All right, let me show the.
Playing the race and racism, and you think that's okay, but that's something else. Go ahead.
Senator,
okay, go ahead.
Our Irish
go ahead. Okay.
other guy, O'Rourke, is not playing a race card.
Who defends every American's right to protest, and so you're agreeing with somebody who says that's un-American. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I refute her negatives and her ad hominem attacks. I will talk about the issues, but I will not deal with that.
All right, let's show the ad involving, this was the first TV ad that Congressman O'Rourke aired, and Deborah, you talked about the 254 counties, and this is the theme of his ad. Let's watch.
The only way for me to be able to deliver for the people of Texas is to show up in every single community, in every county, to drive to all 254 counties.
We've been in Houston, we've been in Dallas, we've been in Austin, we've been in Georgetown, DeSoto, Waxahachie, San Benito,
Bryan, Texas,
San Marcos, being here again in Amarillo.
just human beings, real people making this happen.
Regardless of party or background or geography, we have to be the inspiration for our fellow Texans and our fellow Americans. No one will be taken for granted. No one will be written off.
Come out and share what's on your mind, meet your neighbors. Everyone is welcome, and we really mean everyone.
We've got to work with others who sometimes don't see things just the way that we do. We've got to do this with the power of people. We got to reject the contributions from corporations, because you put me into this position of public trust and I serve only you. That's the beauty of the way that we're doing this campaign right now. No PACs, just people. Thank you.
Okay, and that was a 60-second spot, which goes to show, on one hand, how much money Beto O'Rourke has raised, a huge amount of money. And so,
Most of it out of Texas.
well, he's raised a lot of money in Texas as well.
Most of it out of Texas.
So,
Raised
Brian,
a lot of money in Texas.
let me ask you, Brian, about how effective that ad is, in your opinion.
I think the ad is relatively effective. It just is showing that he's been all over the state of Texas. It really does not define him. It really does not go into issues. Heck, it didn't even go into his background. So just watching that was just a warm, fuzzy ad showing that he's been all around Texas. There really wasn't much there in this ad.
But it seems to be working for him poll-wise. I mean,
Right, warm fuzzies.
and so once the issues come into play, because if you look at where he is on the issues, it's not where a lot of Texans have been historically, and even in poll numbers, as far as tax cuts, as far as Medicare for all, as far as guns, even border, those kinds of issues. So do you think there will be a change if people start focusing on the issues?
And I think people start focusing on the issues. Traditionally, people start focusing on the issues and the candidates as the race gets closer. We've seen this with polling all around the country, and Texas is going to be no exception, where folks really haven't tuned in fully to the race. But once that starts to happen, I think Beto is going to be negatively affected because if you look at Texas as a whole, as I said before, it's relatively conservative. Beto, his record, not necessarily conservative. And so once that is really brought to light, most likely by Cruz and super PACs and other organizations, Beto's numbers most likely will go down. It's very hard to withstand the attacks that are probably going to be coming against Beto.
Deborah.
And see, I think among likely voters, you're probably right. But when I look at this ad, I see a man, and so there are a lot of younger voters who don't necessarily tie themselves to a party. I mean, and I hear it all the time. I think he's reaching across and saying, I want to work with everybody. I think that resonates with a lot of independents and younger voters. And I think, we have to continue to try to define ourselves as political parties. And I think we'll get the votes out of the Democratic Party, but I think he also gets a lot of independent votes.
Karen.
Well, and I would say to that point that, yes, you have a good point. And what is he doing on the campaign? He's making the right moves. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, he's saying he's going to work with everybody. But what I am saying is when ads come out and you say, I'm going to work with everybody, and then you say, well, where would you stand on the Supreme Court pick? Mm-hmm. Against it? Where would you stand on abortion? For it? Mm-hmm. Where would you stand on tax cuts? Against them? Where would you stand on a border wall? Against it? It's hard to say, it's hard to work with everybody when, in fact, the issues are going to come out and you're actually not going to work because you are far more liberal than the state. So I think that's what I was saying about the ads that will come out
I agree.
that are going to define him, and that's when you're going to see his numbers fall.
I agree on likely voters, but I think you're going to see this uptick in new voters, and that's going to make the difference.
Let me ask about that. Karen, go ahead, and then I'll ask my question after that.
Well, I graciously disagree. And because I really think it's important that we, as people who are different on aisles, still can be civil about it. I just disagree with what you're saying. And basically it's because of the numbers are still the numbers. Voting is a very private thing. It's not something you do on a stage. You go into a private booth and you cast your vote. And most people are not going to vote against their own heart and against their own belief system. Most people who are have a certain value set. You know, it's just like going to a new restaurant. I've never tried Thai food. I don't know if I like it. You can do a nice commercial, but if you want me to fill all my kitchen stock with Thai food, it's something I don't know. It's not, you know, I'm a Southern girl. I'd rather have the fried chicken. So I know kind of what my desires are, and I think most people, when they go into that booth, they're going to vote their values. You can warm and fuzzy it all up, but people want a border, people want less taxation, people want less regulation. The things that they want are not the things that Mr. Robert Francis O'Rourke is offering.
Let me.
Okay.
Let me
You can call him Prince if you want to. It was not a dig. It was not a dig.
Let me talk about President Trump, because we did some polls on him, and but obviously when you talk about the midterm election, President Trump is not on the ballot, but in a sense he is on the ballot, right? Because it's still a referendum on the president. So let's take a look at our numbers. This is the opinion of President Trump. We asked people statewide. Favorable, 51% here in Texas. Unfavorable, 46%. Undecided, it ticks up to 3%, but it's really less than 3%. So he does well in Texas for a big state, conservative state. He's still well above water on this, Brian.
Yes.
But he's above water. I'm sure he would like to be doing better. But in Texas, you'll see his numbers are actually better than they are nationwide and in other states. So that goes back to what we have been saying the whole time about Texas leans conservative. And so you can see that in these numbers here with President Trump, that he is still above water in Texas.
And I want to go just through the next poll, because we also asked Republicans what they think of President Trump. And very favorable, 91%, unfavorable, 8%, undecided. I don't know how anybody could be undecided, but it's less than 0.5%.
They didn't understand the question if they're undecided.
But his very favorables are 73%.
Yeah.
So does that, what do you make of that, Brian?
Well, the numbers are really extraordinary on the Republican side.
Yeah, and here's the breakdown.
He has 91% favorable rating among Republicans, 70% very favorable. Now that number right there, the very favorable number, that shows you why President Trump's endorsement in a primary is so very potent. That's why it's powerful, because 70% of people have a very favorable opinion of this president. These are the people who will show up at rallies. These are the folks who have a Trump bumper sticker on, or a Trump yard sign, a Trump hat. You know, you got to have one of those. And so these are the folks. And those folks will vote for who he endorses and who he supports. And so that's why you see races in Georgia and Florida and all across the country where the president has endorsed someone in a primary and that individual wins.
Yeah.
And so on the flip side, well, let's just keep going through this. These are the Democrats then we asked, and we all know, we've heard it for a long time, that Democrats have a very unfavorable rating. So it's 84% unfavorable, either somewhat or very, and very is obviously, it's almost just like the Republicans, who very much have a very favorable view of him. Now, there are 12% of Democrats who like the president. What do you make of that?
Well, you're in a conservative state, so you are going to have some Democrats that may like the president. And so, for various reasons, you never know what the reason may be. Maybe it's they like this tariff.
Maybe it's jobs.
Maybe it's jobs. Maybe they support the border wall or border security. There could be a multitude of issues on why they support the president or why they have a favorable view of him. Or maybe they simply just don't like the system in Washington and they see him as someone that's going to mix things up in Washington, and they like that. So there could be many reasons why, and we could delve into that further. But clearly, he is not very well liked by Democrats. You see a very unfavorable rating of 71%. He is still a polarizing figure in Texas, and so because obviously with Democrats, but there are more Republicans in Texas, and so that is why you will see him above water.
Do you think, Karen, that the president's visit, so obviously you're going to think that the president's visit will certainly help Cruz in a big way?
Yeah, Cruz and all our other candidates. I mean, we have a great slate of candidates with Faith Johnson, Aaron Meek, so many wonderful candidates in Dallas County, Pete Sessions. I think also what they're not talking about is the approval rating with Black Americans for Donald Trump. That has really shot up.
That's what, 36%?
Yeah. 36%.
Why, how big of a deal is that?
That's huge. That's huge. What has kept the Democrat Party, and this is just the numbers, what's kept the Democrat Party in power have been the black vote. I mean, the black vote is the rudder of these elections, and it has been amazing that Trump's approval rating has gone up so. And I think it's because of the facts. You have unemployment rates for Black Americans is high. You have, it's low. You have so many of the things that he's doing are beneficial to the Black community. And they're very thankful for it.
Deborah, you had said something before about, well, go ahead.
No. I'm trying to let my friend, my learned friend over here, have her moment. She says she doesn't want me to do practice defensive stuff. I'm being quiet. Okay, go. Okay.
Well,
okay.
Well, here's what I'm wondering is, and you said this before. So President Trump, when he comes to Texas, we don't know where or when exactly. It's sometime next month, but we don't know exactly where. But do you think? This will further galvanize Democrats to come out?
Absolutely. And I keep going back to this poll because it's likely voters. And so, and I'll be very honest with you. If we don't get outside the box, if we stay with likely voters, Democrats lose. But I believe something is happening in Texas, and I see it because I'm out walking blocks, is that there is a level of enthusiasm and activism out there that we have not seen in past elections. I think Beto O'Rourke helps to drive it. I think President Trump helps to drive it. And I would love for him to come to Tarrant County because I think that helps us in Tarrant County. So I'm asking him to go to Texas Stadium. So
AT&T Stadium, yeah. All right, let's check in with Facebook and see what our friends are saying.
So Roxana Jordan says no Beto. Louis Green says go Beto. And then we have other.
Anybody chiming in about President Trump, which we spent some time on?
Not
yet. All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure they'll be chiming in.
So Lori Bankhead says negative ads have just inspired more people to vote Beto.
That was to your point, Deborah.
Rita Long says bad ads and hate ads against an American just to win, no way.
But Brian, the reality is that they work, right? The negative ads?
They do work. They define a candidate, and people might not like it or want to admit it, but they do work.
And so let me ask a question. And Roxana, Louis, and Lori, thank you so much. But let me ask the question and you alluded to this a little bit before, and that was the new voters, young voters. Do they really show up? Historically, they don't, do they?
That's right. Historically, they don't. And that's what I'm saying. That's why if we stick with likely voters, we lose. But this will be the test. We'll have to see, what the Parkland survivors, that whole movement has done. And so this will be the test to see if we do get young voters out.
How dangerous is it to rely on people who historically haven't voted?
Oh, and let me just tell you something. I think there's always a danger whenever you're working on a campaign, but I think we have to bring new voters to the polls. And so that means we have to rely on young first-time voters. We have to rely on registered Democrats who don't vote in midterms. So to win, and so I will tell you, she's right. Right now, Republicans, because they get more people.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I gave you something.
I'll take it.
You know, Republicans historically have done a good job of getting their people to the polls. Democrats have got to learn to do that. So we have to. I mean, there's some unknowns out there, and we've got to rely on some of those unknowns.
I wanted to get back to the race involving the governor's race, because we asked people the opinions of Governor Abbott and Lupe Valdez. And I think some of the things that we talked about here, this is a favorable rating. We have 60% favorable rating in Texas, 34% unfavorable, 5% undecided, and everybody at home saying, "Hey, wait a minute, that's 99." It's rounding. It's a rounding thing. It actually does add up to 100 when you take the full number.
Right.
But this is what you were talking about before, having a 60% rating in a big state like this.
Correct. Governor Abbott is very favorable with relatively low unfavorables, and so he is looking very, very strong. It is hard to see a scenario in which the governor isn't going to win unless something,
scandal.
You know, a scandal or something out of the ordinary occurs, or there's a huge infusion of cash for Lupe Valdez, which doesn't seem to be coming. And so I just do not see a scenario in which the governor is not reelected as of now. He's looking very strong.
And let's keep
He's
going.
also working very hard. I mean, Governor Abbott is knocking on doors. He is going around to all of our 254 counties campaigning. Yeah. And he is really engaged.
Cruz isn't. Is that what you're saying?
No, Cruz is doing that. But I'm just saying, he is really working hard. You know, Cruz is in Washington a lot fighting for what we want. So that's what you want your senator to be there, not be absent. So, of course, our governor is housed in Texas, so that makes a difference.
So we'll keep going through the numbers here. This is among Republicans. If you thought President Trump had high favorables, Governor Abbott has even higher favorables, 94%, 5% unfavorable among Republicans. And then we'll keep going. This is the independents now, 59%. So to have 59% favorable for independents is pretty good.
Well, this is one of the keys to why his numbers are so very high in Texas, because he's not only popular with Republicans, he's popular with those who have no party affiliation.
Right. This is the opposite of somebody who's polarizing.
Correct. Yes, correct. Abbott just does not seem to make a lot of mistakes. Number one, he doesn't seem to really put his foot in his mouth, so to speak, where he makes errors or mistakes and makes people angry. His numbers are actually really good. And
then let's go and take a look at Lupe Valdez and people's opinion of her. 33% favorable, unfavorable 26%, and then undecided 41%. That's the problem, right?
Correct.
People don't know her, and as you said before, she doesn't have the money to get her message out.
Correct. The undecided number is her problem. In that people don't know her. And the problem is even if she got all those people to like her that are undecided, she would still, probably not be able to beat the governor, because most likely, you aren't going to get 100% of undecideds to go your way. No one does.
And then Democrats, we asked Democrats what they thought of the former Dallas County Sheriff. 53% favorable, unfavorable 13, undecided 34. That number stands out, undecided 34, but again, it goes back to the fact they don't know her.
They don't know her.
Correct.
And so, and Brian, we were talking about this before, and Deborah, I'd be interested in your opinion on this. When you have a candidate like Beto O'Rourke, who has really raised a lot of attention, not only for crowds, but he's gotten a lot of national exposure tonight. He's going to be on Stephen Colbert, The Late Show here on CBS. but he's also raised a lot of money. And so that seems to have made it very hard for all the other Democrats who are running statewide, because he's kind of sucked up all this oxygen and money. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But I think while he's sucking up all the money, he still helps the down ballot. I mean, I know that Lupe needs money, but he still helps the down ballot by getting the message out to Democrats around the state. So do they need money? Yes, they do. But has he been effective in using his? Yes, he has. And I think it will help down ballot candidates.
And let me ask, and I think we just have one more, and that was on independents. And I think we're pretty much going to see the same thing. Yeah, 40% undecided there, 34% favorable, 26% unfavorable. Let me ask, because, this obviously has been, this race looks like it's over, but, you never say never.
Never say never.
But going back to the Cruz and O'Rourke race, I've been at, rallies for both of them for months now. And what do you make of crowd size? Because I always thought, during 2016, it was very interesting. President Trump attracted these enormous crowds, and that always stuck with me, like, wow, that's impressive. At the same time, Beto O'Rourke has attracted some pretty large crowds as well. And so I'm wondering, can you discount a crowd size? Because you're talking about enthusiasm. So what do you make of that?
Well, I don't think you can discount crowd size. You could tell that there was an excitement issue with Hillary Clinton, for instance, because she really didn't have, she would show up and people just weren't excited to see Hillary Clinton, whereas you would see Donald Trump and people were extraordinarily excited to see Donald Trump. The problem is if people aren't excited to come out and see you, if people aren't excited for you as a candidate, then they might not come out to vote for you. Now, I know Ted Cruz has not really garnered the same crowds as Beto O'Rourke. It seems to be the exciting candidate. There's also another factor at play here in that Beto O'Rourke appears to be the Democrats' only chance to win statewide in Texas. And it's one of the only chances they've had in a while. And so you can tell all the Democrats are very, very excited about this candidate. And so I think there's a lot of excitement generated around that candidate because he appears to be a candidate that could win statewide in Texas, which is exciting. He's raised a lot of money. And you also have to think that there's other items on the ballot, not just that race. So that is why I went back to talking about the governor. His likable number, his favorable numbers being so high and being very well liked, and him spending a lot of money getting out Republicans to vote, because the governor may be what in fact helps Ted Cruz win his reelection.
So the governor is the kingmaker.
The governor in this state, apparently by looking at these numbers, the governor is the kingmaker in this state.
Let me go through, because we only have about 5 minutes left, and I really want to go through some of these other down ballot yet still statewide races. So we're going to go through these pretty quickly. Lieutenant governor's race. Dan Patrick, 45% Democrat. Mike Collier at 39%, 14% undecided. And then let's keep going. We're going to go to the Attorney General's race. Republican, the incumbent Ken Paxton, 45%. Democrat Justin Nelson, 39%, 15% undecided. And then one more, the Land Commissioner's race. George P. Bush at 46%, the current office holder right now. Miguel Suazo at 30%, 22% undecided. And so, Brian, we talked a little bit about this earlier, and that was all three of these Republicans are below 50%. How concerning is that for Republicans?
Well, I'm not extraordinarily concerned about that, because these are down ballot races where a lot of people don't really know the candidates all that well. They are, in the mid-40s, and so they are getting close to being at 50%. The Democrats are hovering around 40%, 30, well, except for the Land Commissioner, but the other two Democrats are about 39% of the vote. And so when you look at those numbers, I think that's a generic split, and people voting along party lines, and not necessarily based upon the individuals, because the individuals aren't all that well known statewide.
All right, Deborah and Karen.
they're incumbents. They should be better known. And I noticed you didn't put Sid Miller up there, our agriculture commissioner, who says get a rope about a sitting U.S. senator. But I think they should be worried about those. I think, again, I go back to this poll is likely voters. If we just look at likely voters, we lose. But look at all those undecideds and those likely voters from incumbents. They should know them better. I think, depending on what the vote turnout looks like, they could be in trouble, and especially Paxton.
Karen.
I think that we're going to have a lot of things to celebrate come November for Republicans statewide. The campaigning is finally getting into full gear, and this is a conservative state. We have conservative values, and that's a big push that'll just, especially being able to go straight ticket. I think we're going to see a lot of Republicans go straight ticket this year.
And let me take a look at the issues, and then we'll check in with Facebook one more time. So we asked voters what are the most important issues to them. Border security was the number one, and it was border security and illegal immigration, 33%. Health care, 26%. Jobs in the economy at 11%. Education at 10%. I'll admit, I was a little surprised about jobs in the economy. Brian, you said I really shouldn't be. Why not?
Well, I think that when the economy is doing well, less
Right.
people are concerned about jobs and economy. So, anytime that the economy is doing well, people are a little less concerned about it, and they can worry about other things, such as border security, education, health care, et cetera. And you'll see that. I mean, when people can't find a job, and they can't eat, and they can't pay their bills, they're much more worried about the economy and jobs. And so that is why I think you'll see these numbers lower, and that's why you saw them higher in the past,
Right.
because the economy wasn't doing quite so well. And so you still had a lot of unemployment, high unemployment out there, and underemployment, and that's why these numbers are going down for jobs in the economy, whereas in the past they've been at the top of everyone's minds.
All right, Deborah, and then Karen, and then Facebook.
Oh.
Any reaction just to the issues?
No, I think border security, I think because this president has made that such a divisive issue, and Texas is right on the border, you're going to see that. So that doesn't surprise me. Health care, okay, I think is something that Democrats have been talking about, and to see it at 26%. I am sad to see education at 10% when we have a state that's gutting public education, and that's going to hurt us in the future. And so that makes me sad to see education at only 10%.
And Karen.
I think that I agree that with the strong economy and the economy getting stronger, it's just becoming a non-issue because it's not a problem. But border security is a right of every nation for its sovereignty to secure its border, and that's important, and that's why I don't think that Democrats will do well, because on the issues that are important to Texans, they're on the opposite side of that issue.
All right, and thank you so much. Let's check in with Facebook real quick.
So Alicia Philip Langston says, research who is pro-education. No one even talks about education. Education is the future of Texas. Monica Newberry says, my son will be 18, voting for the first time. My mother and husband also will be voting for the first time. My cousins, aunts, and uncles, all first-time voters. Midterms, all for Beto. Larry Boyer says, youth eat Tide Pods.
Okay.
And Hayden,
that's election related.
Hayden Sparks says, I think the takeaway from this broadcast is Beto is doing well. But other than that, Democrats are still far from being influential in Texas politics.
All right, Hayden, Larry, Monica, Alicia, and everybody on Facebook today, thank you so much. Aparna, thank you very much, as always, for your help. Brian Graham, Deborah Peoples, Karen Watson, thank you for your analysis. This was a fast hour. This really was. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Jack Fink, political reporter here at CBS 11. And now we're going to get ready for our news. We're going to have the greatest hits of our poll coming up at 5 and 6 o'clock. From all of us here at CBS 11, I'm Jack Fink. Have a great afternoon.